Yeah, you're good, Sydney.
All right, excellent. All right, well, I hope everybody's enjoying the socially distanced DAHP Academy so far. I have a very loud cat who is going to scream to get in, probably, so just ignore that. My name is Sydney Hanson. I'm one of the 2 transportation archaeologists here at DAHP. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going to be kind of splitting this talk with Dennis today. Dennis, did you want to introduce yourself? Bueller? All right, well, Dennis will be taking over for me about halfway, so keep that in mind. This presentation is meant to provide an overview of Executive Order 0505 with a particular focus on how archaeologists fit into the process. This will probably be old news to some of you, particularly those of you who work for certain state agencies, but we hope that this will at least be a good refresher. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm a big fan of telling you what I'm going to tell you, so here's a quick overview. We'll start with a discussion of what Executive Order 0505 actually is, how it works, the legalese, all that stuff. We'll then talk about the kinds of projects that can be exempted from 0505 consultation. Moving on, we'll go over how to consult with tribes, and then how to consult with DAHP, including how to fill out our EZ forms. And we'll wrap it up with a discussion of 0505's limitations. It looks like we'll have time for questions, but if not, just write them down or put them in the chat and we can address them during the panel. So Executive Order 0505 came into being in 2005 through then Governor Christine Gregoire. The executive order itself is only about 3 pages of text, so if you want to read it, it's not really a daunting read. Essentially, it states that archaeological and historical sites are important to Washington's cultural heritage and that there are benefits to preserving these sites and that these sites hold significance for both tribal and non-tribal Washingtonians. As for what 0505 actually does, it provides a nexus or a pathway to conduct reviews of projects with state capital funding. For those of you who don't know exactly what state capital funding is, it's money allocated to a state agency as part of the biennial capital budget. We'll sometimes refer to 0505 as Diet Section 106. Both laws make you ask the question, does this project have the potential to impact cultural resources? Through 0505, you answer that question through consultation with DAHP and any affected tribes. This consultation is required for all capital construction projects unless the project is exempt, and I'll talk more about exemptions in a minute. The law itself actually states that state grant or loans for a capital construction project can be withheld if DAHP and the affected tribes are not consulted, or if avoidance or mitigation efforts are not adequate. Like I said, consultation with DAHP and the affected tribes is required, but there are also several other requirements. The state agency must also take reasonable steps to avoid, minimize, or mitigate impacts to historic properties, including archaeological sites. The state agency must also extend invitations to DAHP and the affected tribes to participate in project planning. DAHP must also be given the chance to review any agreements made between the state agency and the affected tribes. You've probably inferred most of the people involved by now, but let's go over it again real quick. There's the state agency with the capital construction project or land acquisition that is not reviewed under federal law, so if it's not a 106 project. There's DAHP and the affected tribes. There might be other parties designated by the state agency who will contact DAHP and the tribes on their behalf. A local government would be a good example. We'll sometimes be contacted by a planner or somebody similar. Then if field work is deemed necessary, there are the hired consultants. These would be your archaeologists and architectural historians. I put the Kraken symbol here because we're a team and we should be working together and communicating when we have questions, but we should also all know what our roles and responsibilities are. So back to exemptions. Projects that are exempt from 05 review are projects that don't involve ground disturbance or the alteration of buildings or structures over 45 years old. Routine or regularly scheduled maintenance might also be exempted. This is stuff like road striping. Or projects aided by a federal agency action, because when there's federal money involved, it becomes a Section 106 project. Exemptions can be detailed in memorandums of understanding between DAHP and the state agency, so contact us if this is something your agency is interested in. Here's a good example of a project that was exempted from 0505 review. For this project, the City of North Bend received funding from the Transportation Improvement Board, or TIB, which is a state agency. Because the city was receiving state capital money, they needed to complete an 0505 review. However, the project was just an asphalt overlay of an existing road. That's it. There was no ground disturbance, no impact to any historic structures. It was just new asphalt on top of old asphalt, so it was exempted. Moving on to tribal consultation. As I mentioned before, this is required under 0505. We sometimes get asked if DAHP will contact the tribes on the state agency's behalf. The short answer is no, we won't do that, but we will keep the tribes in the loop. For example, if I had comments on a survey report, I would CC the tribes on my email to the state agency. If you're not sure how the tribes want to be consulted, just reach out to them. In my experience, most of the tribes in Washington are pretty easy to get a hold of through email, but some tribes may be based in areas with bad internet or phone service, so they might prefer physical mail instead. If you're not sure which tribes to contact for a project, talk to your agency's tribal liaison, or look at the DAHP website or the tribal layer on Wizard. This is available to anybody, so even if you don't have a Wizard account, you should be able to see that. You can also contact the Governor's Office on Indian Affairs to find out what tribes you should be talking to. As for consulting with DAHP, the first step will be for the state agency or their designated party to contact us through email with completed EZ forms, which we'll talk about next, and detailed project information. You can also set up face-to-face meetings with us. Obviously, it will be through Zoom in the time of COVID, but it's an option. So we have 3 EZ forms, and we have instructions for filling all of these out on our website. There's a link at the bottom there if you need it. Depending on your project, you may need to fill out all 3 or none at all. So here's a really basic breakdown. If your project involves ground disturbance, you'll fill out an EZ1 form. If not, you'll proceed to question 2. If your project will impact a building or a structure that's 45 plus years old, you'll fill out an EZ2 form. And if not, you're done consulting with DAHP. You'll fill out an EZ3 form if the structure your project will be impacting is determined eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. We're not going to go into too much detail about EZ2s and 3s because this is archaeology focused, but you can reach out to the Built Environment Unit with questions about those forms. And before I turn it over to Dennis, I have a quick PSA, mostly for Stephanie's benefit. We don't want EZ forms for SEPA projects. This is what the SEPA checklist is for. We also generally don't want them for Section 106 projects. There are some exceptions to this rule, such as HUD projects, but if you're really not sure what form to use, just reach out to us and ask. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis.
Sydney, you have a question from Kat Kelly first.
Okay, hang on. Let me find the chat.
I can read it to you if you'd like. It says, just to clarify, for state agencies with archaeologists and or architectural historians, I presume that we're not using EZ1 and 2 process.
As far as I know, that is correct because the EZ1s and 2s are more meant for people who are not archaeologists or architectural historians.
Yes, so this is Allison. So the concept of the EZ1s and EZ2s, as we used to say, were for weatherization projects. When HUD would tell a senior that they had to consult with us and the senior had no idea what to do, we came up with EZ1 and EZ2. Sometimes we get those from planners and local governments, but if you're a professional, it's much better for just to send us the regular information that we want in terms of the APE. And before I move to Dennis, I just want to add one thing. We are working, the governor's office with me is working on an update to 0505. We were pretty close to getting something out for review, and then we got hit with COVID, and then we got hit with forest fires, and every time the governor's staff and I work on something, the governor's staff gets pulled off to just this endless 2020 set of emergencies. It just never ends. But the idea with a redrafted 0505 executive order will be clarity. The initial one, I agree, is not clear. It was written by too many people. We will work on clarity. It will add a dispute resolution process, which is very important when an agency and DAHP don't agree on going forward. Right now, there is not a dispute resolution process, so we'll put one in there. And the other piece is, I'll put it this way, I bid high. I did not want agencies to be able to delegate the tribal consultation. My hunch is I may be pushed back on that at higher levels. We'll see. But one of the pieces I think has not worked well on 0505 for every state agency has been the tribal consultation. Some state agencies are actually quite good at it, so I need to be careful. But there are other state agencies that have not been as conscientious as they should be. So I think it'll probably be a negotiation between agency directors and myself on the tribal consultation piece. I don't know where it will land. The other players that are very active in watching how this proceeds are the cities, the counties, and the ports. In fact, they are very concerned about 0505 as it exists now, and obviously concerned about, sorry, I just saw Kat's question, so let me just finish. So the cities, counties, and ports are concerned about 0505 now, although they do it, and of course are concerned about a redraft. Not that they're not going to do it. So Kat asks, is this a stepping stone to codifying 0505? Yeah, it is the thought. So I know some legislators would like to do a codification right now. The governor's office is asking legislators to step back. They still want to do the redraft of 0505, again, to get more clarity on the process for everyone. And then the idea is in maybe 1 to 2 years going forward and codifying that into state law. So again, what the governor's policy office is really looking to do is move forward with a new cultural resource executive order that is more easily understood, has a better process. The other piece we're working on is with the capital budget shop on how we integrate 0505 with legislative projects that are just put in as one-liners and how that works. Sometimes the legislature puts in money to refund projects that have already happened. And we're opening discussions about how do we handle that when a project has occurred without any environmental review or a project is moving forward. So we're going to take a deeper look into that. And yes, Kat, eventually the governor's office had said, well, assuming we have the same administration, obviously we don't know what's going to happen in November. But under this administration, if we are still all here, they would look in 2 years as to going forward. Let's see. Did you say the new 0505 is going to go out for review by agencies? No, it will go out to review for agencies, probably agency directors. That is what that's who the policy shop works with, is agency directors. It will also go to the Association of Washington Cities, Counties, Ports. I will try to move them to at least put it out to the Association of Washington Archaeologists. But we are moving, and I apologize. We were going to move a year ago, and again, with COVID and wildfires and I don't know, plagues and locusts and everything else the governor and everyone has faced, it's just slow. It slowed everything down. But there will be a review, but executive orders are always issued straight from the governor. So, you know, the final decision on what an executive order looks like is the governor at the time, because it's an executive order from the governor. So, and in 2 years, if there are things that don't work with executive order, if it moves to legislation, yes, it will go out to the tribes for review. Naomi, yeah, of course, we will send it out to the tribes for review. Absolutely. Sorry, I didn't mention that. Yes. But let me go forward and just say, I lost my train of thought again, that, when it moves into legislation, if there's things about the executive order that aren't working or need to be revised, that's when we'll probably be working with legislators and others to revise it. And of course, you know, expect that it's going to be a negotiation with cities, counties, ports, and industry. The upside to that, I will say, is that when we worked on the human remains law, we had to do the same thing. We worked with prosecutors and cities and counties and tribes and and the timber industry and all sorts of different stakeholders that I never thought would have an interest. And in the end, we came out with a really good law and a state physical anthropologist. So I'm hopeful that we will be able to negotiate our way into a stronger cultural resource review process for state projects alone. And we'll just have to hang on and see how it goes. I've been pushing. The governor's office has been great. They're really positive. They just, I don't know why we're getting plagues, but we are. But they have been positive about moving forward. So we'll see where this goes. And if you have any more questions, just put them in the chat box. I'm happy to answer. So I'll turn it over to Dennis with apologies that the existing 0505 still exists. I know it's very fuzzy, but again, we have high hopes to move forward with something better. So Dennis, if you're out there, I will move it over to you.
Thanks, Allison. Can everyone hear me? Allison, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, and I'm going to mute myself now so nobody has to listen to me talk about my dogs. Okay.
Awesome. Okay. Hey, my name's Dennis Wardlaw. I'm one of the transportation archaeologists here at DAHP. And first, you'll have to excuse this setup I have and this working from home. I really can't do two monitors right now, so my notes are to the right. I'm fully focused on this presentation, even if it looks like my eyes are drifting to the right. So I'm just covering the second half of the talk, which is the EZ1 form. Like Allison touched on earlier, it's a form we've designed to really help with the 0505 process for state agencies and local governments who are receiving capital funds that have to complete the 0505 process. So let's just go over what the EZ1 form is trying to do. First of all, what we really want to know is the funding source of the project. We need to make sure that this is indeed an 0505 project. So if there's like pass-through dollars from HUD or from FHWA, this is not the form for you. We just need to make sure that it is indeed an 0505 review. So what are we looking for? We're looking for a detailed description of the proposed project. We also need a detailed description of the existing site conditions. That includes the vertical and horizontal extent of the project area. We need to know like if the site area is heavily disturbed, if it's on 20% slope. The more information that can be provided in this form, the better. We also need to know where this project is occurring in space, not just the county, please. We also need a specific amount of information as possible. A street address is always preferred, but at a minimum, we need like a township section range of the projects, and we need a map. A map is very key to this whole process. No map, we will send it back and ask for a map. I would say that a 1 to 3200 scale USGS topo map where the project area is the minimum, and we also need the project elements included on this map. And if you're encountering an archaeological site, no, we don't need to do that. Okay, next slide. Hey, Sydney, can you get the next? Okay, there we go. So this is the form we have. You can see at the top again, we're looking for the funding source. And so below that, or below that is detailed description of the proposed projects. Also the site conditions. Oh no, sorry. I apologize for 1 second. I'm trying to organize this. Give me 1 second. So this is what we have. Again, it's kind of re-emphasizing what we just were looking at. All the project information, the funding source. We also have a space where, if you have buildings involved with a project area, we really need to kick this out to an EZ2 form, and that's covered in a different presentation from DAHP. So we have space for the project description, the site conditions, and you know, on the next page we have the project map area, township section to range, and a place for the project address, and then we have the place for the map. If your project area is the entire Game of Thrones universe, this is probably not the form for you, but you know, it is what it is. Next slide, please. So this is a good map that we received some time ago. It's got all the project elements for like a sidewalk improvement project. I think this is in King County. Proposed work for the sidewalks, for the intersection improvements. This really gives us, this really captures like what we really need to see for a project to just kind of get an idea of whether more work is needed or not. Next slide. So what do we need? So what are we looking for on this information? Sorry, there's a question from Sarah. Submitted to state agency regarding, Sarah, if it's all right, I'll come back to your question after this presentation's done. So what are we using the EZ1 form for? We're trying to determine if there's a proximity to other identified resources, proximity to attractive resources, and proximity to known sites with human remains. We're also trying to figure out the, as we touched on earlier, levels of disturbance, and we're also trying to figure out the vertical and horizontal extent for construction. That can be very important for us to know, because if your project is only going 6 inches below the soil, that's different than going 4 feet deep and having a lot of potential for impacting sites. Can we get the next slide? So the reviews go one of two ways. Either DAHP determines that the project has no real potential to impact cultural resources, and that being the case, we write a letter and that is submitted to file, and no work is needed. And the other is we recommend further work, and this might mean a cultural resource survey or archaeological monitoring, and this that really just will depend on the projects. That's the old refrain from our industry. It depends. Next slide. So here's a handy flow chart of what happens if DAHP recommends a survey. And the one important thing to keep in mind, if we do recommend a survey or project, our agency is not trying to pick on the agency or the person running the projects. I like to say that DAHP is agnostic on merits of projects. What we're really concerned with is the potential for impact to resources within the state of Washington. So this flowchart represents how things should proceed if a survey is recommended. The state agency or designee contracts with a firm who conducts the work, who then submits the completed report with cover sheet and completed forms attached. We really do not want to receive the forms from the consultant, but these things happen. DAHP reviews the report for sufficiency, and if the report meets guidelines and no further work is recommended, DAHP will issue our letter, which completes the 0505 review. You're done. Next slide. And a quick note that we do have guidelines, and they do require basically a lot of the same information that we require on EZ1 form, and it's very important that all the information is included in these forms or in the report, because if it's not, we will send it back. We really need to know like all the ABCs of the project and the regulatory review process. Next slide. EZ2 and EZ3 forms. EZ2 form and EZ3 forms are not completed by an archaeological consultant. Their purposes are to determine if buildings are eligible for the NRHP, that's the EZ2 form, and to assess effects, that's EZ3 form. For guidance on EZ2 or EZ3, contact the DAHP Built Environment Unit, that's Holly Borth. Next slide. Okay. So there are limitations to the EZ forms. When the level of the effort for the review is not commensurate with the scope of work, what does that mean? Basically, your project is too complicated for an EZ1 form. We're not talking about a grind and overlay project or maybe a bypass or built bridge replacement. These things just, you know, it's not appropriate. If you have something like that, just please reach out, get in touch with us, and we can help guide you through the process. Also, when there is a federal nexus for your project, we always defer to the 106 process. And finally, when there are cultural resources that are considered significant in the opinion of the SHPO within your project area. If there is an archaeological site within your project area and that can't be avoided and will be altered in any way, a DAHP permit will be needed. And, you know, so just reach out to us, reach out to Dr. Lance Woolwich, and we can get that process started for you guys. So next slide. So this is me just thinking a little more globally about the 0505 process and also just cultural resources in general. A lot of these cities, counties, and state agencies, this is not just a one-off for 0505 funding or the SEPA process. So it's a good idea to think about this programmatically. That's you deal with these things just like all your projects. You sit down with your stakeholders, with DAHP, with the tribes, and you work through these things. You identify the problematic projects, identify ones that are going to need a lot more work, identify ones that will meet exemptions. It's just prioritizing and organizing your work. A good example I like to use for this is the Transportation Improvement Board's annual funding. Every year we get a spreadsheet from them, and that includes about 70 or so projects. And we review the projects, and ones that need exemptions, we exempt them. And the other ones, we say, yes, they will need more work, or it looks like they will need more work. Sometimes we don't get enough information for the reviews. But so, and after that point, TIB issues a letter to the cities and counties getting the funds, and we work through the process through it then. And an example I also like to use is WSDOT's annual meetings with the tribes. There are 36 tribes, I guess, that have interest in the state of Washington. And WSDOT takes time to meet, I guess, every one of these tribes. There are the tribes that want to have meetings, and DAHP is involved with these too. And basically, WSDOT sits down in an annual and yearly, goes through the projects within the tribe's area of interest and discusses each one. They will even WSDOT will even go over exemptions for these exemptions projects, so they know like what's going on in their area. So it just really gives them a time to really talk over these projects and be on the same page. This is a really good planning tool that should be considered if you are not thinking about this now. And next slide. So, in conclusion, Executive Order 0505 applies to projects with state capital funding. It involves consultation with DAHP and consultation with DAHP and tribes are required, and you should know a few things. When your project is an 0505 and when it isn't. If your project, you should know if your project's exempt from Executive Order 0505, and you should know your role and responsibilities under EO 0505. And with that, I will try to answer questions.